So we've been looking at the different cities in the country that have instituted rent control. I wanted to focus a little bit on California in particular, for one because of the Proposition 10 and some of the news coverage around that, and as a way of getting into your particular research looking at San Francisco. What can you tell us currently about how rent control is handled in California and the cities that have it, and what Prop 10 would do if it passes?
Absolutely. So right now there's a proposition on the ballot, Prop 10, which you alluded to, which is asking voters whether they want to repeal the law that banned cities who didn't have rent control by 1995 from adding true rent controls.
True rent controls meaning?
So sort of like in a similar style they currently have in San Francisco, where it sort of hit all the points I just enumerated of you get to cap rent increases, you can apply it to buildings that were built, you can only apply it to buildings built before a certain date, you can't impose rent control on single family homes. So this law that was passed in 1995 called the Cost-Hawkins Act, it effectively curtailed strongly municipalities' ability to add new rent controls in California.
So if you didn't have it before, you couldn't add it after?
You could, but it would be much more watered down versus what I think a lot of cities would like to do now. So Proposition 10 is effectively saying, let's repeal this law and not add anything in its place, and it will effectively release California cities to go back to innovating with rent control. They'll have pretty much free reign to do whatever is sort of within the bounds of other laws. And so several cities have already indicated that if Proposition 10 passes, that they will either add new rent control programs or expand the current ones in the case of Santa Monica. And so what this means is that previously almost no city, for example, previously no city that, at least that I'm aware of, in California imposed rent controls on if you wanted to rent out a single family home. And now if Prop 10 is repealed, they have the ability to do that. They can apply rent control to buildings of any ages. Like right now, like I said, in San Francisco, it has to be built before June 1979. If this law gets repealed, they could push that date forward into the future and say built before 2017, then has rent control. So understandably, landlord associations are opposed, single-family homeowners are generally opposed to this law. But a lot of tenant activist groups have been strongly pushing for this because they feel that the affordability crisis in California has gone completely out of control, and that repealing Costa-Hawkins will allow them to innovate with rent control laws to maybe try to solve the crisis.
So San Francisco is unique, and it's seen some of these problems especially severely in San Francisco. Could you tell me about what you were looking for with your research, particularly as it pertains to San Francisco?
Yeah. One question that the other papers, even some of the best papers in literature don't ask, is does rent control work on its own terms? So these papers have generally focused on either adding or removing it wholesale. But for the most part, these events of just sort of adding it or subtracting it happen rarely. For the most part, once the city adds rent control, it never gets rid of it, or almost never gets rid of it. It was ended in Massachusetts due to a statewide referendum, not because Cambridge or Boston decided it was a bad idea. So my paper wanted to understand a little bit better two things. Does rent control actually shield tenants from price increases? Mm-hmm. So once you're in your unit, are landlords deterred from evicting you to take advantage of rising prices? Mm-hmm. The other thing I wanted to understand better was, given that units are controlled, do controlled landlords respond to these price signals by increasing or decreasing the supply of controlled units? So, standard economics 101, you increase the price, so then you increase the supply. Mm-hmm. But rent control does have a lot of perverse incentives for landlords. And so I was curious whether the strength and number of these perverse incentives would mean that even under an identifiable, meaningful, substantial price increase, but would these landlords actually try to put out more controlled units or maintain their controlled supply, or they withdraw from the controlled market? And I should mention there's another California law that was passed in 1986 called the Ellis Act, which if you're in California is a big deal. And what the Ellis Act says is that at any point, if you no longer want to be a landlord, you can quit the business. You can withdraw, you can kick out all of your tenants in a no-fault eviction, no matter whether they're good tenants or bad tenants, everybody's got to go. And then you can keep the building vacant. It's actually a little more complicated than that, what they can do afterwards, but that's the gist of the law. So if rent control, in spite of all of its rules, had a functioning, quote-unquote, normal market, when prices would increase, you'd see no change in housing supply. But if the market was distorted, you would see prices would increase and landlords would respond by using the Ellis Act to exit it. And that's exactly what I found. That controlled landlords decide that they're better off leaving the controlled market when prices go up, either to find some back channel path to the uncontrolled market, or maybe for some complicated reasons due to how the changes in the tenant pool after a price increase.